Hello, Practical Law, and welcome to week 8. So, our next unit is going to be on crime in America, and you only have one lesson from that unit this week. That is going to kind of be an introduction to where we're going to pick up next week with the rest of the lessons on this unit. In this first unit, we're going to define what crime is and talk about some possible causes of crime. To be honest with you, that's what the whole unit is about, is defining what crime is, talking about some possible causes, talking about some possible solutions. Also, we'll look at the role of the victim and victims' rights as well. Now, this unit is also going to be an overview because we will get into more detail down the road about what constitutes like criminal law and civil law, what constitutes criminal, crimes against criminal law, crimes against civil law, things like that. Okay, so this is just kind of an overview unit that is paving the way for some things that we're going to talk about once we get done with our first mock trial. Now, you're going to hear me say this a lot as we move through this unit. One of the difficult things about this is it is very, very hard to define crime because crime wears many faces. People are going to disagree about the causes of crime. They're going to disagree about how crime should be punished. So we're going to give an overview here. We'll try to give as many possibilities as possible, but realize a lot of what we talk about here is up to discussion. Okay. Now, as we've done in the past, there are no notes that you have to fill out on this. You take your own notes. There's no worksheet or anything. So be sure you are copying down things that you think are important. I will try to give you a heads up about what to copy down, but be sure you're following along and taking your own notes as we work through this lesson. Okay. Now, like I said, crime wears many faces, and the causes of crime and the results of what's going to happen if you commit a crime are going to vary. All right. Now, before we get into that, let's define what crime is. Okay. We're going to talk about the nature of crime. Something that one does or fails to do that is a violation of a law is a crime. And for this behavior, there is a set penalty. You need to get this definition down. This is what the definition of crime is. It is something you do or something you fail to do that is a violation of a law, and there is a set penalty. For example, if you fail to buckle up when you drive, that's a crime. And if you get pulled over, you can receive a penalty for that. You can receive a ticket. All right. So it could be something as simple as that. We're not just talking about murder or rape or anything. It could be something simple like not buckling up when you drive. So something that you do or fail to do that is a violation of the law and there's a set penalty for it, that is a crime. Okay. Now, we talked about this in our first unit way back at the beginning of the semester. What people consider crimes depends on what they believe is right and necessarily for orderly society, okay? Decisions of what constitutes a crime are made by legislatures. We've talked about that. And legislatures base their decision on what people believe is right and necessarily for orderly conduct in society. I want you to get down this point too, that legislatures make the crime, or legislatures define what the crime is. And what constitutes a crime is based on what the people believe is right and necessarily for orderly conduct in society. That's another reason I had you do that Desert Island project at the beginning of the semester, is you guys were going to decide what was right for your society and come up with laws to protect that. Okay. And what constituted crime in your society and come up with laws to prevent that. Okay. You guys were in charge because that's what happens in real life. So legislatures decide what makes a crime, but they base their decisions on you, the people. Okay. Now, you don't have to copy these last 2 points down, but our desire to define what a crime is comes from our need to protect human rights and regulate human conduct in society so that we can all live together. Why do we care about crime? Right here is the answer. We want to protect people's rights. We want to regulate human conduct, but we want to do that because we want people living in harmony. And it's important to remember that when you commit a crime, not only are you breaking the law, it is also a human rights violation. Okay? Victims of crimes are victims of human rights violations because we believe that law and order is necessary to protect people's rights and to regulate human conduct so we all live in peace and harmony. If you violate that stuff, okay, you have violated somebody's human rights. Now, along the road, or along with the discussion of this nature of crime, and I'll be honest with you, on the next screen, you don't have to copy anything down. Okay, you don't have to copy anything down on the next screen. But governments at all levels, and we've kind of talked about this because we talked about local governments and state governments and national governments. Government at all levels is concerned about preventing crime and apprehending and prosecuting criminals. Okay. So much so that each level has its own specific set of responsibilities. All right. We talk about the local level, they set like traffic violations and things. The state government and the national government will work together to prosecute murders and rapes. Okay. So each level of government is concerned about preventing crime. Since the mid 1980s, as much as we see it in movies and TV, and as horrible as it is, there has been a general decrease in the number of index crimes. Now, index crimes are things like larceny and theft, burglary, motor vehicle theft, aggravated assault, robbery, forcible rape, murder, and non-negligent manslaughter. Okay, so there has been a decrease in these crimes. Okay, not saying they're not serious. A lot of them would still be considered felonies, but we've seen a decrease in this number of crimes. All right. What we have seen an increase in is arrests for violations of drug laws. About 80% of arrests were for possession, 20% for the sale and manufacturing of drugs. Okay. Now, what's interesting is, and we'll talk about this next week, is that drug use and alcohol use are often gateways to other types of crime. And there is a general concern about dealing with drug abuse and alcohol abuse in order to prevent an escalation and to prevent more crime. Okay? So, most arrests today are made for drug law violations. So, even in movies and TV, we see a lot dealing with the more serious index crimes like murder and rape and things like that. But there's actually a decrease in the total number of those being reported. Okay? While crimes related to drug law violations are on the increase. Now, I want you to get down the first 3 points on the next slide. Again, when it comes to crime, the causes of crime are many and they are complex. Okay, you need to be sure you remember that. The causes of crime are many and they are complex. Because of that, they are controversial. Now, there are a couple terms I want you to get down. Number one is incarceration. Incarceration is imprisonment by the state. So if you commit a crime and you are put in prison, you are incarcerated. Okay, so incarceration is imprisonment by the state. And it could be the state, it could be the federal state. Okay, the federal government can incarcerate you, the state can incarcerate you. Heck, even the local government can incarcerate you if it's for something like a traffic violation. Okay, especially if it's a traffic violation tied to alcohol abuse. Okay, so anytime you're imprisoned, you are incarcerated. In recent years, we've become very much concerned about something called community policing. Community policing is a strategy where the community works actively with local police to lower crime rate in areas. The whole idea is that we're going to build closer connections between the police and the communities they serve. All right. And they're trying to foster better relationships and more positive relationships between the police and the community they can serve. Now, I'll give you an example of this, not necessarily in fighting crime, but several years ago in Roanoke, because a lot of children were worried when they saw police show up, because the only time police were showing up was because something bad was happening. Roanoke City Police started carrying trading cards. Like they had their own trading cards. Like Officer Thompson had his own like baseball card, okay? And the idea was to get kids to collect a whole series of police trading cards. And so the child had to approach the police officer and ask for the trading card, and that was supposed to help foster better relationships. That's an example of community policing, okay? Where the community and the police work together. Now, if you can build trust with the police, all right, and you can teach the community to be on the lookout for suspicious activities and make them feel comfortable in calling somebody and say, hey, I see somebody snooping around my neighbor's house and my neighbor's not there and I don't recognize this person. Can you please have somebody come check it out? Something as simple as that, okay? That's what community policing is all about, okay? Is fostering closer ties between the police and the community, and that will lead to a lower crime rate, okay? Because people feel comfortable with each other, all right? So please be sure you get those 3 points down. Now, like I said, disagreements exist over the causes of crime and the fact that solutions to crime are not simple. Okay. In fact, there are disagreements over the solutions to crime. That's why it's not simple. And it can get very, very controversial. All right. So as we work through the next couple of lessons, just keep that in mind is some of these areas are going to be very, very gray. And if you're in class and you have questions and stuff like that, please feel free to ask. But realize that my answer might be, we don't know. That's a good question. Somebody needs to bring that up. Okay. Because there is this disagreement over the causes of crime, over the solutions to crime, and the fact that solutions to crime are often not simple. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to talk briefly about as we go through the next couple of lessons, like I said, we're going to be trying to identify causes of crime, solutions to crime. We'll talk about victims. In fact, that'll be the last thing we talk about. So, real quickly here, what I want to talk about is crime on campus. Okay. And when we talk about campus, we're talking about schools. Now, to be honest with you, you don't have to copy anything on this slide down. This is just for your information. Okay. And we're going to talk about elementary, middle, high, and college. All right. The overall rate of violent incidents in all public schools, now this is from 2006, which was the latest date that our textbook had. The overall rate of violent incidents for all public schools is about 3 incidents per 100 students. Now keep in mind that is violent incidences. Okay. So it was 3 per 100 students. There are twice as many incidences in middle school as in either primary schools, which are your elementary schools, or high schools. Also, the incidences of bullying are more common at middle school than at elementary school or high school. And if we were in class, I would ask you, why do we have higher incidences of bullying and why do we have higher incidences of violent crime in middle schools as opposed to elementary schools and high schools? Well, the answer is biological. What are students in middle school going through? Puberty. They are trying to make sense of their place in the world. They are trying to find uh, their place in the world to begin with. Okay, and you've got all these hormones going through, and you know it is very very confusing time for some people. It's a very very difficult time for some people, and this biological change manifests itself in violent incidences and incidences of bullying. Okay, because like I said, these middle schoolers are trying to discover their place in the world. So that's why it's higher in middle schools than in elementary schools or high schools. Okay? Because you have these adolescent kids that are going through puberty and are trying to figure out exactly what is going on. And a lot of times they react in violent ways or in ways that are bullying. Now, when we get to high school, there is a major problem with drug use. Okay, more than 75% of schools report at least one incident of the distribution, possession, or use of illegal drugs on school campus. Okay, not saying it's not possible at elementary schools or middle school levels, but we do tend to see a lot of this in high school. All right. Now, what's interesting is when you go to college, the alcohol rate goes up. Okay. On college campuses, alcohol is a major problem. All right. And to be honest with you, it's because of the way that often colleges are set up, where kids are kind of turned loose. All right. They are seen as adults. And a lot of times, if they are not disciplined enough, they go overboard, especially when it comes to alcohol. Okay. And the problem with alcohol, I mentioned this in the last slide, and we're going to talk about this next week. And the problem with drug use, too, is it's kind of seen as a gateway. It can lead to other assaults, it can lead to sex offenses like rape, burglaries, auto theft, and other problems. Okay. So, one of the issues with both drug abuse and alcohol abuse is it can lead to other crimes. Okay. Because of impaired judgment. All right. And we see that a lot on college campuses with the use of alcohol. Now, that's it for this lesson. It was a nice, quick lesson. Wanted to give you an overview, wanted to define what a crime is and define some key concepts, some key terms associated with crime. Where we are headed next week in the lessons for next week, we're going to talk about gangs and gang violence. We're going to come back to this topic of drug abuse and drugs and crime. We'll talk about alcohol and crime. We're going to talk about some prevention strategies, and we're also going to look at the role of victims, okay, and protection for victims' rights, okay. So we got 3 lessons coming up next week. This was just an introduction to kind of show you where we're going and give you some background before we get into some more specifics.